Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming. First and foremost, I'd like to thank Bob and his crew for an awesome event. Really, really excited. Tonight, I'm going to talk. I have two talks, and I'm going to try to make it quick because I'm really tired. One of the subjects is how the African-American diet affects the environment in Africa. I'm going to expand it a little bit to include animal agriculture affecting Africa, because really that's where the problem is. And that includes factory farming, meat and dairy consumption, both in Africa and outside of Africa, especially in the United States, the American diet that African Americans also eat. So I think that would be a better subject to talk about. So the consequences of animal agriculture on the environment is caused by such things as climate change, deforestation, land degradation, and in turn, these things cause water scarcity, drought, and loss of biodiversity. And these things are happening very much so in Africa. Climate change, increased climate change is affecting the whole world. Africa is not the source of it. Africa is a victim of climate change. Climate change is coming from the environmental damage being done by the greenhouse gas emissions and factory farms all over the planet, especially in North America and Europe. So Africa doesn't have a lot to do with it, although that is changing, and I'll talk about that soon. So like I said, Africa is the continent that will suffer the most under climate change. And these temperature rises will trigger sharp declines in crop yields in tropical regions. And as estimated in Africa, 5 to 10% of Africans will be malnourished, undernourished, and will suffer diseases that are related to increased temperature, like malaria. And 50% of all malnutrition-related deaths occur in Africa, unfortunately. While a 2 degrees centigrade rise in temperature will increase the people affected by hunger potentially by 200 million worldwide, and most of it is going to be in Africa. Globally, Africa and especially Western Asian countries will suffer the largest crop losses, while these regions are highly dependent on agriculture and have the largest limits in purchasing power. The other thing that's happening, and I've seen it happen in my own country, Ethiopia, where I was born, wildfires are raged from time to time, and there's no way to stop it. The other thing that happens a lot in Africa is deforestation, and land degradation, the main reasons for it, and both worldwide and especially in Africa. Agriculture is one of the main reasons for it, and 80% of that is used agriculture is to raise animals for food and grow crops to feed them, especially in developed countries. In Africa, animals are roaming free, a lot of pastoralists that go from region to region and destroy the crops, the land, because of the animals that are overgrazing. Deforestation is responsible for probably 20 to 25% of global warming due to the release of CO2 stored in the trees. Worldwide, clearing land for livestock grazing, especially in the Amazon, and agricultural production for cash crops, which is happening in Africa a lot, is another reason. And crop production for animal feed, especially things like soybeans, is happening, of course, here in the United States, but also in Africa. Ethiopia is a good example. Ethiopia is exporting soybeans to the Middle East, while its people are suffering. But there's also local reasons for deforestation in Africa, and one of the main ones is 90% of the continent uses wood for fuel for cooking, and I've seen that from my personal experience. My nonprofit organization does medical missions, and I've led a couple of medical missions to rural Ethiopia, and we go for 3 to 4 to 5 hours driving in single trains. Ethiopia, when I was growing up, had dense forests. It was like 50% of forest. By 2009, when I went to Ethiopia, it was less than 2%. That's how much damage has been done. And most of it is because there's no electricity, no energy, so that people are using it for cooking. Now, not so much in Ethiopia, but especially in the Congo, commercial logging is a big problem, just as it is in the Amazon. The difference is in Africa, in the Congo, what's happening is the rainforest protects a lot of these wild animals. And when the logging companies come in and destroy the trees, the forests, these animals are exposed. And what happens is a lot of people start killing these animals, and they're considered, what they call bushmeat, which is very expensive. It's considered a delicacy and very expensive. And these animals are being slaughtered because of it. In 1990, in Africa, 30% of the world's tropical forests, it had 30% of the tropical forests. In 2009, less than 20, like I said, in Ethiopia, it's much, much less. The rate of deforestation exceeds the global annual average of 0.8%. And then population pressure exacerbates the problem. When I was growing up in Ethiopia, when I was 14, 15 years old, Ethiopia had 25 million people. 2013, 2014, close to 100 million. That is a fourfold increase in the population. And it's a hush-hush story discussion. Population is a very sensitive issue, but it is a problem. And it is a problem that cannot be ignored and should be publicly discussed. Because the animals have nowhere to go, and there's not enough land for both humans and animals to coexist on that continent. When I was growing up, my grandfather used to tell me, in the capital city, you could hear lions roar 20, 30 kilometers outside the city. Now you can drive for 8 hours or 9 hours and see, forget lions, you won't even see hyenas. They've been decimated, killed, and some of them have escaped into Kenya. And that's, a lot of the Kenyan wildlife is thriving because a lot of Ethiopian wildlife are not being protected, and so they're going into Kenya. So population growth is a big problem. Land degradation, increased demand for meat equals increased demand for raising food animals, and then animals grazing on grassland, which is a big problem. Overgrazing, which is something that, again, I've seen a lot in Ethiopia, causes soil erosion, reduction in soil depth, soil organic matter, and soil fertility, leading to future impairment of land productivity and then the ability of the soil to hold water. And of course, then what happens? You've got water scarcity and drought that follows because of deforestation, climate change, and all the other things that I just talked about. 1/4 of the African population currently experiences high water stress. The problem with water is becoming very severe. Major lakes and rivers in Africa are just shrinking every day. For example, the big lakes, Lake Chad in Chad Republic, is gone down by 10% in the last couple of years. Lake Nakura in Kenya, which I've been to, a beautiful lake where a lot of not only human beings use it, the animals also need the lake to exist, and it's disappearing. Lake Dana in Ethiopia, the source of the Blue Nile, is disappearing. The Zambezi River, shared by 8 African countries in South Africa, are all shrinking. And the fear is, and this is a real fear, that the water stress that African countries are feeling is going to lead to resource wars. And it's already happening in the Nile River. Ethiopia is building a dam And the Egyptian government has threatened to bomb the dam. It's a big, big problem because the Egyptian government, the Egyptian people depend on the Nile for a lot of things. And so these resource wars are popping up all over the continent, and it's going to get worse. And what oil is now is going to, as a source of conflict, water is going to be the one in the future, especially in Africa. 88% of water is used for agriculture in Africa. That's another problem. And meat production depletes water resources. And there are a lot of African countries that are exporting meat to other countries. Ethiopia is exporting meat to the Middle East. Live animals and dead animals cut up into pieces. Botswana does the same thing. They are actually exporting meat to the European Union. In Africa, water shortages afflict 300,000 people, killing 6,000 per year. The glaciers on top of African mountains like Mount Kilimanjaro, Mount Kenya are disappearing, leading to water scarcity. In 2050, human population expected to reach 9 billion. Water will be a problem. Another problem that is happening both in the Amazon and in the Congo is wild animals die when animal agriculture usurps their habitats to raise livestock and grow food crops. Some displaced species, for example in the dwindling Congo, are now in danger of extinction. And then of course plant and animal species are also dying at alarming rates. Some of the planet's most endangered species in Africa, including the black rhino, African elephant, the cheetah, the mountain gorilla, the rhinos, are all disappearing because of population growth, because of agriculture, because of deforestation, and because of hunting. So now we come to intensive factory farming. The one country that has the most mechanized and most modern factory farming is South Africa. However, there are other countries that are not lagging far behind. In other African countries like Ethiopia and Kenya, factory farming is still in its early stages of development and remains technologically unrefined, but they are growing and very quickly. And they're getting support from governments, from agencies like the United States, USAID, the Bill Gates Foundation, and other entities. The overcrowding, mechanization, and improved production methods that typify factory farming have not yet been systematically applied in these nations, although that is, like I said, changing. For example, Nigeria is one of the fastest growing countries that is developing factory farming. There are 10 commercial farms in Nigeria, fully automated, doing exactly what they do here in the United States. The poultry industry is highly involved in Ghana. And then, like I said, multinationals like, governments and corporations are moving into African countries. Factory farming is not only growing, but the expansion of fast food outlets is also growing rapidly. And big corporations are moving in. Tyson's Food is hooked up in Ghana. Mozambique is working with the USAID to develop their poultry industry. Kentucky Fried Chicken have outlets in Kenya, Tanzania, South Africa, and I bet you many other countries that I don't know about. I am co-authoring a book right now called Africa and for Animals, and I'm writing a chapter on factory farming in Africa. And I've been researching this thing, and it's scary that every year things are just moving so fast, it's unbelievable. In the next 5 to 10 years, Africa will be fully mechanized in a lot of the major countries, including my own country. So, livestock production from intensive agriculture production that's even happening in Africa devastates the livelihood of local farmers, not to speak of what it does to the animals, destroys rural structures and communities. It's an inefficient use of food sources and production that makes food supply insecure, causes what's called vertical integration, dislocation of farmers from rural settings to urban settings, where they become, criminals, homeless, because they're not educated, they have no job experience, they have no relatives, families, or friends to go to, they have no money, and they become homeless and dangerous to society. By 2020, countries in Latin America, Asia, and Africa will be the leading producers of animal products, with industrial animal production likely being the predominant method and production method. And we can talk about veganism in the US and promoting veganism, and I totally agree with it. I don't have an issue with that. But the reality is the problem is not the US. I mean, right now it seems like we are the problem, but the problem really is the developing countries, especially India and China, where meat eating is becoming something that's very common. A lot of people, when they move from poverty into middle class status, acquire the middle class status and have a little money, the first thing you want to do is eat meat. And it's a sign of, advancement, improvements of one's life. And so that is what's happening in these countries, and that's where the issue is. So we can talk about veganism in the United States, which has 300 million people, but you have 1.5 billion people in China, or 2 billion, whatever their number is, and same thing in India, and then the other BRIC countries. The problem is huge, and it's vegan outreach is not going to be enough. 60% of African workers are employed in the agricultural sector. Animal agriculture, owned by large foreign corporations, threaten the livelihoods of millions of traditional farmers. They just throw them out of their land, basically supported by the government. There's a grab for land in Africa right now, and it's happening in all the countries, including Ethiopia, where Indian corporations, Chinese corporations, even other Middle Eastern countries come in and get land almost for free, kick out the inhabitants of those lands, and construct factory farms or produce crops for cash. And so these farmers are displaced and have, like I said, nowhere to go. And like I described earlier, they resort to crime, they become homeless, they live in rural areas, in urban areas where they live in overcrowded situations. Loss of agricultural biodiversity is another issue, because African farmers lose the ability to continue complex farming systems learned over generations. The knowledge of specific crop varieties and how they best grow. The knowledge of what to do with marginal lands is not situated for industrial production. So, what is the solution? I mean, there are many, these issues are multifactorial, they're very complex, and there are a lot of different approaches to it. But one of the things that we can do is, and would help very quickly and change the, shift things towards a better world, would be by feeding Africa a plant-based diet. Like Milton said before, the basic diet of Africans has always been plant-based. When I traveled to northern Ethiopia, to rural parts of Ethiopia, when we were treating patients, 99% of them they don't know what meat is. They don't eat meat. And so that's what we need to revert back to. The problem is urbanization, people going up the economic ladder, supposedly civilization and modernity is causing some of the problems that we're facing. Ethiopians, for example, having a big fat belly is supposed to be a sign of wealth in my culture. And so when people start improving their lives and making more money, the first thing they want to do is eat junk and the American diet, which is what's causing the medical issues, the environmental issues. So resorting back to what we used to eat as Africans is what is needed. Locally, like I said, stop eating meat, period. If even a reduction of 15% would decrease the malnourished children's number by 3.6 million. But imagine doing it 100%. It would be amazing. And then globally, same thing, promoting a plant-based diet for Africa and the world. And I think that would help and go a long way to bringing some change. Thank you for listening to this. My last presentation is a more personal one. It's based on my experience in So this presentation is based on my experience at the Lumina Castle in Lumina, Ghana. It's the inspiration that led Bob Linden and I to come up with the idea of Soul Food for Thought, which we turned into an awesome event in San Francisco and here tonight. So in 2009, I traveled to Ghana with my cousin to attend the second West African Vegetarian Congress. We were representing International Fund for Africa, the organization that I'm president of. And after the conference, we had some time to visit historical sites, and one of the places we decided to go to was the Lumina Castle, located on the Gold Coast of Ghana. This castle was built by the Portuguese in 1482 as a trading post that later became a major stop in the Atlantic slave trade. When we arrived at the castle, situated on a beautiful beach, the beauty of the area belied the place's hidden history. We had a guide who spoke about the gruesome history of this castle. And after passing through the main entrance, after a short distance, we arrived in a courtyard where young slaves had been displayed naked as a officer of the Dutch army, who were the occupiers of the castle at the time, stood on a balcony overlooking the yard. And these girls were paraded around, and he would pick out one of them, and they would wash her up and send her upstairs to be raped. By this time, when we heard this, both myself and I were turning green. I literally started feeling sick, but we had to compose ourselves and we needed to move on. The guy kept talking about all sorts of other things that I couldn't even hear anymore because it was so disturbing, to say the least. At the end of the courtyard, there were two entrances. Both of these entrances displayed signs on top. I don't know if you can see this, but it says female slave dungeon and the male slave dungeon. So these were the entrances into the dungeons. And this doorway led into a windowless dungeon, very humid and damp, with no light penetrating into the darkness. There was an indescribable odor that I've never experienced before. According to our guide, 400 women were put into this place. They were stored in this filthy place. And honestly, I don't think it could hold more than 100 people. Slave traders kidnapped people from the interior parts of Africa, and with the help sometimes of locals, and brought them to this castle to become slaves to be transported to the Americas. These poor human merchandisers were shackled in the dungeons, where the slaves had to defecate, urinate, menstruate, and sometimes deliver in this place while shackled. I don't know if anybody's been to West Africa, but almost year-round it's hot. It's very humid, 100-degree temperature and humid. And imagine being in this kind of place with 400 people with you. Imagine what it feels like. While the guy was talking about what happened 3 centuries ago, I felt that I was being transported back in time. I felt like I was there. I could smell the dungeons, filth, fetid stench. I felt the terror and the agony of the people. It was an experience that I've never, ever experienced before. I felt my chest got tight. I got dizzy and sweaty. I thought I was going to faint, actually. And same with my cousin. Again, we have to regain our strength and compose ourselves. And we left the dungeon to go to the next dungeon, which was where the male slaves were put in. And this place is a bit bigger, and they told us that 600 men were put in there. So, while standing in this dungeon, something even profound happened to me. Something that had never happened. While in the first room, I was feeling sad and felt sorrow for the women victim that went through this hell. The second dungeon that held the men, when I walked in, I suddenly, for reasons that I can't explain to this day, saw mental images of animals in factory farms. And just to digress a little, I was introduced to the world of compassion and animal rights, animal liberation, the love for animals because of a little dog, a little Maltese dog, 9 pounds, who became my guru, my Buddha, my teacher, and transformed me and made me who I am today. And I'm eternally grateful to this little guy who left me 3 years ago. But so all my activism after that was, in regards to dog. That they were my connection to the animal world, and I focused on dogs, and I treated dogs, and I helped save dogs in Houston, Texas, where I used to live. And even though I became vegan soon after Nikita, my little Maltese, came into my life, I never really connected with factory farms, farm animals. It's not that I was vegan, I believed in the concept, I watched the videos and I felt pain, but not until this day that I really connected with factory farm animals. What I imagined that day was hundreds of chickens, cows, pigs, and turkeys, and other miserable beings similarly reduced to property of humans, crammed into small spaces on top of each other, terrified, crowded together with no space to move, no clean air to breathe, and no access to the outside world. And I compared that with what I imagined human beings 3 centuries ago went through. And the realization was so painful, I can't even describe it. The depth of sadness I felt when I realized that although human slavery, even though it still exists, at least officially and legally it does not, and it's been abolished, and no human being is going through this hell, animal slavery is still alive. It's still with us. Billions of non-human animals are experiencing similar mistreatment right now across the globe, in the United States, in the Middle East, in Europe, in Africa, in Asia. This horrible abuse continues. These death camps are everywhere, and we tolerate this. We didn't tolerate human slavery and we abolished it, but we are tolerating this crap every day. And it just kills me to realize that I live and walk and breathe and do all the things I do every day, realizing that not far from where I am here now, slavery is going on in France, and it's painful. It's really painful. The violence and suffering we visit on these sentient beings attest to the deep and far-reaching hatred and disrespect we have for non-human animals. After leaving the second dungeon, we were taken to another area which had a small exit in the wall of the castle through which the slaves were taken out to the beach to get on the ships to start their life-altering journey. These, they look pretty, wide, but believe me when I tell you this, they're very narrow. A normal-sized person can't pass through these narrow doors. Most of the Africans that are brought to these dungeons and stay there for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, lose so much weight, but by the time they're ready to be transported, they can pass through this. My exposure to the horrors of Elmina Castle opened my heart and soul to what happened to Africans then and what's happening to animals now. I became better able to connect on a deeper level with the plight of farm animals, like I said. But it also expanded my understanding of the complex ways that racism, sexism, and speciesism are all intertwined and interconnected. And the day I came back from this trip, I sat down and I said, I have to do something about this. I have to go back to the US and talk about this. And that's when I approached Bob and I said, Bob, I had this amazing experience in West Africa, and it's profound, and I'd like to share it, and we need to do something. And so, brilliant Bob came up with the Soul Food for Thought idea, which we developed into a wonderful event in San Francisco. My primary target, even though it's for all Americans, especially for Americans of color, because I think they can connect with this on a deeper level, even though I was scared to some degree that comparing animal slavery to human slavery would be unacceptable to African Americans, but I didn't care. I'm an African, I'm an American, I'm an African American, and I feel very comfortable making that comparison, and I wanted to make sure that other people understood it. And that's my story. Thank you. I contributed a chapter in Will Tuttle's book, Circle of Compassion. And it was based on my experience in the Lida Castle. And I talk a little more in detail about it, but that's one of the things we talked about. The other thing is, next week, I'm going to England with Don Moncrief to speak about, it's a vegan conference, and we're going to be speaking about the Ethiopian Vegan School Lunch Program. And basically, what this is, my organization, with the help of Don Moncrief's Well-Fed World, we've launched a school lunch program for children that come from very poor families whose parents are either very poor to provide lunch for their kids and dinner, or the kids have lost their parents and they go to school and all day eat nothing. Sometimes those kids that have families that can support them will be eating lunch while these other kids who don't have families that can provide them food watch while these kids are eating. And our organization, with the help of Well-Fed World, started a campaign to feed vegan food to children, and started out with 2 schools and now we're up to 6. And we're feeding over 200 kids every day. To make this all across Africa, because there are a lot of kids that need vegan food, period, but then also vegan food, because that's our philosophy. And we're also trying to make it self-sustainable by creating bakeries and vegan vegetable gardens, so that the schools can produce vegan food. And so, if anybody wants to support us, we appreciate it.
So that's great that you told us about, that's amazing that you told us about your experience. Tell us about what movements are, like what the young people are doing as far as like veganism and adopting it for the next generation.
Where?
In Ethiopia, in West Africa. Where is the vegan movement? They're looking young.
Actually, there are a lot of vegan movements in Africa. You'd be surprised how many people are really interested in veganism. Keith can speak about some of that. He and I and Dawn, a couple of years ago, did an event where we, basically a vegan event, and we got a lot of support from young people. There are a lot of Ethiopians and people in West Africa, in Ghana, for example, that are very committed vegans that are trying their best with limited, money to do whatever they can. The problem is they need support, and that's why our organization exists, and that's why other people through organizations like ours, like Don's organization or like Keith's organization, can impact some change. Yes, ma'am.
You said in the first talk that being outreach isn't going to solve the China-India problem. What are we going to do?
No, I'm not saying it's not going to solve it, but it's we're focusing a lot on the U.S. and I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just that there's a bigger problem that we're facing in the rest of the world. While meat consumption is decreasing here in the United States and activism is going up, and the rest of the world is exactly the opposite. And so we have to keep that in mind. That's all I'm saying. That there is a big growing problem that we need to tackle and not just focus locally.
They're influenced by.
Yeah, I just want to point out that we're working a crowdfunding campaign for the Ethiopian School Lunch Program. We have a matching grant of up to $100,000. And so even we're looking for donations, of course, but even if you can't, sharing it on your network, the return on dollars is amazing. It takes like $8 to feed a child for a month. I mean, it's just incredible the kind of leverage they're getting. So again, even if people don't have the resources, if you share it on your network, that will help get the word out. And you've got brochures, leaflets that we come in there to where you can look at it, and it's really easy to share.
I just wanted to say it's such a pleasure to meet you, and I happened to be at the LA Marathon with you last weekend, and I met the Ethiopian ambassador that was there, and I have his number, and I would like very much to integrate that oftenoutintotheworld.org is another organization that's going back and forth to Africa quite frequently in other countries, and really working closely to help children to build schools, but they're really looking into also the issues that we're having right now, like still existing in the rainforest, with the issues of the soil being potentially contaminated, you know, and we're bringing collective communities of organizations together to collectively know each other, and collectively bond together as many nonprofits together, because there's more opportunity if we collectively come together.
I totally agree.
And I want to thank you so much for being here. I've been really much learning just listening to this one conversation. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you all for staying and for these wonderful speakers this evening and for enjoying the Ethiopian food that we've had tonight. We're going to end up the evening with 2 more songs by Lamore and the Mystic Band, and we will see you back here tomorrow morning for 8 o'clock at Breakfast of the Champions. Thank you.